I saved my marriage because of you, the billionaire whispered as he put his foot on the shine box. My company survived the recession because of your advice. The shoeshiner just smiled and kept polishing. Little did the CEO know he was talking to someone who'd sacrificed his own fortune to save his family's legacy. Welcome to True Human Tales. Before we continue this incredible story of hidden wisdom, unexpected sacrifice, and the true meaning of success, tell me in the comments, from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. We're building a community that honors those who find extraordinary purpose in ordinary places. Carlos Martinez had worked the same Manhattan corner for 30 years, shining shoes with his wooden box. He arrived at 6:30 a.m. daily, reading the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and New York Times before customers arrived. By 7 a.m., executives, bankers, and entrepreneurs lined up. They came for shoe shines, but stayed for something else. Carlos had a gift for listening and asking exactly the right questions at the right moments. "Tell me about your problem," he'd say quietly while polishing expensive leather. In the rhythmic motions and anonymity, powerful people shared concerns they'd never voiced to anyone. What they didn't know was that Carlos hadn't always been a shoe shiner. 15 years earlier, he'd been Dr. Carlos Martinez, Harvard MBA, former McKinsey consultant and CEO of Martinez Industries, a $200 million company employing 3,000 people. Carlos had been groomed from childhood to lead the family business. He'd excelled at Harvard, spent 5 years at McKinsey, and returned at 30 to take over from his father. For 10 years, he'd been everything the business world expected: aggressive, innovative, profitable. But when the 2008 financial crisis hit, Martinez Industries faced bankruptcy. Carlos had 3 options: sell to a competitor who would lay off thousands, declare bankruptcy, or sacrifice everything to save the company. He chose sacrifice. Carlos liquidated personal assets, mortgaged family properties, and used his wealth to keep the company afloat. But it wasn't enough. To truly save 3,000 jobs, he stepped down as CEO and brought in better crisis management. The decision devastated him personally, but saved the company. Martinez Industries survived and thrived, but Carlos lost everything: his position, wealth, and identity. The shoeshine stand started as temporary income. But Carlos discovered something more valuable than his previous success: purpose without pretense. Carlos's customers represented New York's business elite, unaware they were sharing problems with someone who'd sat in similar boardrooms. David Kim, a tech entrepreneur, came Tuesdays, struggling with scaling issues. His startup was hemorrhaging money despite having innovative technology. "You're thinking like an engineer when you need to think like a customer," Carlos advised one morning. "Stop building what you think they want and start listening to what they're actually asking for." That conversation led to a complete product pivot that eventually made David's company worth $50 million. Margaret Foster, first female CEO of a major investment bank, battled imposter syndrome despite her obvious competence. She'd come Fridays, getting her heels polished while sharing doubts about her leadership abilities. "You don't need to be perfect. You need to be authentic," Carlos counseled. "The people questioning your authority are threatened by your competence, not concerned about your mistakes." Margaret went on to become one of Wall Street's most respected executives. Robert Chen owned a family business being torn apart by sibling rivalry. His brothers wanted to sell to a conglomerate. Robert wanted to preserve their father's legacy. "Sometimes the best way to honor the past is to ensure there's a future," Carlos said during one of their conversations. "Your father didn't build this company so you could fight over it. He built it so you could build something even better." That conversation led to family reconciliation and a restructuring that preserved the company while giving each brother the autonomy they needed. But Carlos's most challenging client was billionaire William Sterling, whose success had come at the cost of his personal relationships. His marriage was failing, his children wouldn't speak to him, and his single-minded focus on wealth accumulation had left him isolated and unhappy. Every morning for 2 years, William sat for his shine and gradually revealed the emptiness behind his public success. Carlos listened without judgment, asked gentle questions, and slowly helped William understand that no amount of money could buy back the relationships he'd sacrificed. "Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure," Carlos told him one morning. "You've built an empire, but what good is ruling over nothing that matters to you?" William eventually stepped back from active management of his companies, repaired his marriage, reconnected with his children, and found happiness that had eluded him despite his billions. None of these executives knew their shoeshiner understood their challenges, not just intellectually, but experientially. He had faced the same pressures, made similar mistakes, and learned the hard way that true success required balancing ambition with humanity. Carlos had become, unknowingly to his clients, the most sought-after business consultant in Manhattan. But unlike traditional consultants who charged thousands per hour, his advice came with the price of a shoe shine and the assumption that he was simply a wise man who had learned about business through observation rather than participation. On a Tuesday morning, David Kim approached with someone new, Michael Rodriguez, his VP of Strategy. The young man was fresh out of Harvard MBA program, but struggling with leadership challenges at David's rapidly growing company. "Carlos, I'd like you to meet my new VP of Strategy," David said as they approached the shoeshine stand. "Michael's brilliant, but he's been having some difficulties with team management. I told him you give the best business advice in the city." Carlos looked up from organizing his supplies and felt a jolt of recognition. Michael Rodriguez had been one of his students during the semester he'd taught as a guest lecturer at Harvard Business School 3 years earlier. Michael's eyes widened as he saw Carlos clearly for the first time. "Professor Martinez? How are you here?" The recognition was mutual and immediate. Michael had been one of Carlos's most engaged students, someone who'd asked probing questions about leadership ethics and the human cost of aggressive business strategies. David looked confused, glancing between the two men. "You two know each other?" Carlos continued setting up his shoeshine equipment, keeping his expression neutral. "Michael was in a class I guest lectured for at Harvard." But Michael was staring at Carlos with growing amazement. "Class? Professor, you didn't just guest lecture. You were one of the featured speakers at the Leadership and Ethics Symposium. You gave the keynote address on sustainable success in family business. Your Martinez Industries case study is still taught in 3 different MBA programs." David's foot, which had been headed toward the shine box, stopped in mid-air. "Martinez Industries? Wait, the manufacturing company that survived the 2008 crisis?" Carlos continued working, applying polish to his brushes with the same methodical precision he brought to everything. "That was a long time ago." Michael sat down heavily on a nearby bench, his face showing a mixture of shock and recognition. "Professor, I wrote my entire capstone project on your turnaround strategy. The way you restructured debt, maintained employment levels, and transitioned leadership while preserving company culture, it's considered one of the most elegant crisis management examples of the decade." By now, David was staring at Carlos with new understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're that Martinez. You ran a $200 million company." "I used to run a company," Carlos corrected quietly. "Now I shine shoes." The 3 men sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Michael asked the question that was obvious but difficult. "Professor, why are you here? What happened?" Carlos continued his morning routine, but his voice carried a weight that his customers had heard before, without understanding its source. "I discovered that saving a company sometimes means sacrificing your position in it. I chose to preserve 3,000 jobs rather than protect my own wealth. The company survived. I started over." David, who had been coming to Carlos for business advice twice a week for 4 years, was processing this revelation with growing amazement. "All this time, when I've been asking you about scaling challenges and management decisions, you've been asking someone who faced the same problems you're facing now," Carlos said. "Someone who made some good decisions and some terrible ones, and learned from both." Michael was shaking his head in disbelief. "Professor, do you have any idea how many executives would pay anything to get the kind of advice you've been giving away for the price of a shoe shine?" Word of Carlos's true identity spread through New York's business community faster than stock prices during a market crash. Within a week, his corner had become an unofficial pilgrimage site for executives who had been studying his business strategies in MBA programs while unknowingly receiving personal counsel from the man himself. Margaret Foster arrived on Friday with a different energy than usual. Instead of sitting for her regular heel shine, she stood beside his setup with an expression of profound respect. "Carlos, I learned yesterday that you're the Martinez from Martinez Industries. For the past 3 years, I've been coming to you for advice about leadership challenges, not knowing I was talking to someone who had been exactly where I am now." Robert Chen approached with similar recognition. "My business school used your family business case study as an example of how to balance stakeholder interests during crisis. I had no idea I was getting personal consultation from the subject of the case study. Even William Sterling, the billionaire developer, came by with new perspective. Carlos, I've been telling my wife about the wise shoe shiner who helped me save my marriage. She looked up some of our conversations after learning who you are. She wants to meet the man who taught me that success without fulfillment is meaningless." But the most significant response came from an unexpected source. On Wednesday morning, a black sedan pulled up to Carlos's corner. A woman in her 50s emerged, wearing understated but expensive clothing that indicated serious wealth. She approached Carlos's station directly. "Mr. Martinez, I'm Patricia Martinez Chen. I believe you know my maiden name." Carlos looked up sharply. Patricia was his cousin, daughter of his uncle Roberto, who had been a significant investor in Martinez Industries before the crisis. "Patricia, it's been a long time. 15 years to be exact, since the family meeting where we all decided you were crazy for risking personal bankruptcy to save the company." Carlos returned to his work. "And you were probably right." Patricia sat down on the customer chair. "Actually, we were wrong. All of us. We saw your decision as financial suicide. We didn't understand it was moral courage." She continued, "Carlos, Martinez Industries went public 3 years ago. The IPO was valued at $400 million. The company you saved now employs 5,000 people and has become a model for sustainable manufacturing practices." Carlos's hands paused for just a moment before resuming their steady rhythm. "The board of directors asked me to extend an offer. They want you to return as chairman, not CEO. You proved you're willing to step aside when necessary, but chairman. Strategic oversight, culture preservation, the kind of wisdom-based leadership that you've apparently been providing to half of Manhattan for the price of shoe shines." Patricia pulled out an envelope. "This is the formal offer. The salary alone would be more than you earned as CEO, plus equity that would make you wealthy again within 5 years." Carlos finished the shoes he was working on, accepted payment from his customer, and then looked at the envelope Patricia was holding. "And what would happen to this?" He gestured to his shoeshine setup. "You'd give it up, obviously. You'd be running a major corporation again." Carlos was quiet for a long moment, watching the morning foot traffic of executives hurrying to their own corporate responsibilities. "Patricia, let me ask you something. In the 15 years since I left Martinez Industries, how many people do you think I've helped through this corner? Not just business advice, but actual life changes, marriage salvations, career redirections, personal breakthroughs?" Patricia looked confused. "I don't know, a few hundred? More than 1,000. CEOs, entrepreneurs, managers, even some employees who couldn't afford formal consultation. I've helped them think through problems, make better decisions, find balance between ambition and humanity." He continued, "If I return to Martinez Industries as chairman, I help one company serve 5,000 employees. Important work, but limited impact. If I stay here, I continue helping individual leaders who go on to affect hundreds of thousands of people through their own companies and decisions." Patricia stared at him. "You're turning down a multi-million-dollar position to shine shoes?" "I'm choosing a multi-million impact position over a multi-million-dollar position," Carlos corrected. "There's a difference." Patricia left the envelope on Carlos's shoeshine box and walked away, shaking her head. But Carlos didn't open it immediately. Instead, he continued his morning routine, serving customers who had no idea they had just witnessed a man choose purpose over profit in the most literal way possible. Later that day, Carlos opened the envelope, read the offer carefully, and then tore it into small pieces. The decision wasn't difficult. He had finally found work that used all of his abilities in service of something larger than himself. 3 years later, Carlos remained on his corner, but his operation had evolved. He'd formalized consultation work, setting aside hours for extensive guidance while offering free services to young professionals. His corner became known as Martinez Corner in business circles, organic recognition when something valuable becomes part of community culture. David Kim's company reached $200 million valuation. Margaret Foster became Fortune's CEO of the Year. Robert Chen's family business successfully transitioned generations. William Sterling wrote a book about finding fulfillment beyond financial success. But the most significant validation came from Lisa Chang, a Goldman Sachs associate who'd sought Carlos's advice about a promotion requiring 80-hour weeks and relocation. Lisa had turned down the transfer, found advancement allowing work-life balance, built both successful career and fulfilling personal life. She married, had children, became managing director on her own terms. She still visited monthly with her children to meet the wise man who helped mommy make good choices. Carlos learned that sometimes the most successful decision prioritizes impact over income, purpose over prestige. His corner became where powerful people remembered that success without meaning was expensive emptiness. The Martinez Industries offer had been real, multi-million-dollar opportunity. But Carlos discovered something more valuable: satisfaction in using hard-earned wisdom to help others build better versions of success. Every morning, setting up equipment and reading newspapers, Carlos reflected on his journey from boardrooms to street corner. He'd lost a company but found a calling. He'd sacrificed wealth but gained purpose. The most successful leaders aren't those with biggest offices or highest salaries. They're those who use experience to make other people's journeys easier, wiser, and more meaningful. So I ask you, have you met someone whose wisdom seemed disproportionate to their circumstances? Someone who helped you see solutions you couldn't find alone? Share their story in the comments. Tell us about unexpected mentors in your life. Because at True Human Tales, we believe wisdom often comes from unlikely places, and sometimes the most valuable lessons are learned not in boardrooms but on street corners. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, share, and help us celebrate people who choose purpose over profit. Until next time, remember that true success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you contribute to others.